Found a new productivity app. Let me tell you about it. It's the greatest thing ever. Oh, did you hear about that productivity book by Mr. Awesome Sauce? It's the greatest thing ever. Fast forward 2 months. Another system down the drain. I can't do any of these. Maybe there's just something wrong with me. I can't seem to make any of these work. What's going on? What if it's not the app? What if it's not the book? What if it's not ourselves? All right, where is it then? Maybe it's in something we still need to acknowledge. The limits. Welcome to the Rhythms of Focus podcast for wandering minds who are tired of feeling that they have to force themselves to make things happen. Maybe know that when things line up well, that tendency to wander actually becomes a powerful wave of focus. I'm Dr. Kourosh Dini, fellow wandering mind. It wasn't that long ago that I struggled to make things happen, whether it was to remember when to pay a bill, do things over time, or look at a list without feeling repulsed. Fast forward through years of study and practice, I can now not only deal with the world, I can be creative, playful, and engage in the ways that make sense to me. I can be a doctor, musician, father, still play games in the evenings. I've created this podcast to share these ideas so you can do the same, hopefully with a lot less of the troubles I needed to go through to get here. Whether you have ADHD, deal with anxiety, or just suffer from a powerfully creative spirit, I invite you to join me in this weekly podcast to start finding your own way to a calmer, more intuitive space. Please note, I'm not functioning as your doctor, psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, therapist, or otherwise. This is here for education, if not entertainment, and I do hope you enjoy it. The promises of some productivity system can be powerfully seductive. The idea is that we'd get more done with less effort, stay on top of it all. Everything's organized. Everything shows up exactly where we need it. Heck, I do have a system myself, and I think it's pretty darn awesome, let me tell you. It's all shiny and new. But that may well crash too. We often push limits. It's important to push limits. Play, this depth and breadth of flow between self and world, discovery, question, and tension. It's a vitality that once it finds root can be such an inspirational flow, the sap of mastery and meaningful work and relationships. We see it in the toddler, in their focus while they're stacking blocks, and we see it in the crafts master that has that same focus as they're in that deep reverie. Play pushes limits. We tend to think of limits as somehow enemies, or perhaps they're ever-present challenges that must be dominated, broken through, if not destroyed. And we can see that as well between the toddler and the adult. To reach that place of being able to stack blocks, we have a sense that our environment can hold us, that it won't interrupt us without care or reason, that somehow takes us and our beinghood into account. Maybe we push one way or the other, we try to wander this way or that, but time and again, in ways we know and in many ways we don't, perhaps only feeling it as this gentle wave from some distant shore, we are supported in being here and now. The craftsperson, similarly, has done the work themselves of establishing those things. The environment, whether appearing to be a chaotic mess or this pristine lining of tools and resources, somehow it's been placed to be in tune with that sense of the creative self. Internally, too, skill and knowledge have been whittled as their own tools, well worn in time and practice. They trust their environment to support that creative self. They can simply be and allow that creativity to well from within. But to get to those trusted environments, we discover those limits that line the objects of our world. Our words, our knowledge, our skills, our beinghood exist by way of being bounded. Many artists quickly discover that limitations can, in fact, enhance creativity. But how? Is it simply that we limit options and therefore offer some relief to working memory? Is it some wordless inspiration, perhaps? Well, it could be both, likely more. I think it's through these testing of limits that we establish what we can trust. We know what the playground is. We know what works, what doesn't. And certainly we can test and retest our limits, what we can trust and what we cannot. But once we've established what we can trust, and more importantly, acknowledge, perhaps even respect them as things that exist. Play has this tendency to appear. In systems of productivity, we have several limits that we need to respect. And before I even say what those limits are, I want to define productivity itself, because it can be such a nasty and perverted word. Probably I could do a whole episode on that, but for now, just defining it. Productivity is the art and skill of bringing attention to intention. That's it. This art and skill of bringing attention to an intention. Now, perhaps I can also differentiate that from meaningful productivity, which I define as a practice of finding and weaving mastery and meaningful work into our daily lives and relationships. All right, so now that I've defined the idea of productivity, there are 4 limits that I currently count that benefit from our respect, some of which we tend to be okay with, or at least pay lip service to, and others we ignore completely. These 4 are time, agency, working memory, and trust. I'll say them again: time, agency, working memory, and trust. The trouble with most systems is that we don't recognize, let alone acknowledge, that we're limited. Further, that we have to balance ourselves within these limits. As an example, when we're asked to make a brain dump, we might initially feel relieved. Hey, I don't have to hold this in my mind. But quickly, we become overwhelmed again, if not worse than before. We are overwhelmed with our sense of obligation, some responsibilities consciously, some unconsciously agreed to, our sense of needing to organize this brain dump now, to be able to even know what organized means when it comes to this mess we've now created. We do not trust we can get to what we want to. We have no sense of time for it. It does not fit our working memory. Let's take another example, that of hyper-scheduling, this practice of scheduling every minute of the day as if we were budgeting our time like money. Here, we clearly do acknowledge the limits of time, but we avoid the limits of agency in our sense of trust of being able to follow through. For example, agency being this ability and skill to decide and engage non-reactively appears at numerous points when we've hyper-scheduled. When that time comes to do the thing, how would we feel? What if something more important were going on? What if we miss something? How do we stop if we're not done? And there are many other questions that can come to mind. These questions are particularly important to a wandering mind, whose time sense is more aligned to nature's time than to that of the man-made clock. Check out episode 23 for more on that. Yes, we can make adjustments on the fly, but that drains that sense of agency. And we're confronted with the worries of procrastination and the plain and simple "I don't want to" feelings. Let's take a look at a third example, that of the weekly review. The advice is to go through each one of our projects and make sure that all of them have a next action in place, getting the actions themselves generally more organized, that each of these actions are then listed on the correct action lists, all of which can be useful ideas. I myself even listed in one of my books something like 20 different questions you could review at a weekly review. And the idea is to do this every week. One of my students described this process to be something like dragging sandpaper across his eyes. Quite a brutal metaphor. It's incredibly exhausting, and one of the reasons why many people often don't stick with this aspect of a system. In this situation, we're not respecting the limits of agency. We often refer to energy, but I'm not sure that's often useful in our thoughts here, because energy can fluctuate widely, depending on what we're doing. But we can still show up, as in a visit, and then make a decision. Sometimes we find the energy by plucking at those windows of challenge that meet us where we are. But agency, that ability to decide and engage, as we reflect on the sense of emotions and options of the moment, that does seem to have its limits. It's not clear what those limits are. It's not measurable in the usual sense of measuring. But then again, most things that are meaningful cannot be measured. We can still consider it internally. For example, I've since simplified my weekly review. The primary question I ask is, when and how will I see it again? I can tie it to my central attention hub that then presents things when and where I want to see them. And I do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm me. There are many other examples of troubles that we can get into with our systems. But the takeaway is this. Whatever system you have, consider how you might test and then hopefully respect the limits of time, agency, working memory, and trust. There are skills and tools that you can use for any one of them. And with practice, each of these can become well-worn paths. At that point, if something new comes to mind that, let's say, we'd like to set aside for the moment or engage now, we can make that decision. We have a place for it, either in front of us now or on some known path of attention to meet us where we trust we would see it and not be overwhelmed when we do. Play, care, mastery, meaningful work, these grow along with a greater sense, resting sense of being. Years will go by since I write a piece, and I'll have no idea what I was thinking about at the time, but there's still this thread of, yeah, that sounds familiar, I remember that. Years ago, when I was thinking about getting good at the piano, I would choose some small area to get good at, and specifically a scale. At the time, it was C minor, and with practice, I could eventually play it forwards, backwards, hop between notes, really without thinking. Then I grew to trust my own skill with that, and as I did, I'd grow even more into the process of flowing through these windows of challenge alongside that sense of play. I can hear that in those pieces that I have from some time ago. This following piece, I picked out of my library from 2023, it's called Agradablemente Demasiado. I have no idea if I've said that correctly. I said it as I was learning my Spanish. It means pleasantly too much, I think. I like to contrast things. In any case, I hope you enjoy the piece. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, kindly subscribe, rate, review with whatever app you're using. If you're on the Apples, press the Apple buttons. If you're on the Spotifys, press the spots. If you're on the YouTubes, press those things, whatever the things. And if you're feeling especially generous, consider leaving a review. Maybe mention your favorite piano piece or just say hi. Your support helps more wandering minds find this podcast.